I'd like to call to order the January 8th, 2024 Committee of the Whole and regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. Can everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Board members, with an agenda before you, are there any changes? Okay, we have a slight amendment to the committee chair assignments, but I think we can just discuss that when that comes up. So I'll let you guys know. Yes.
I had a communications item that I wanted to
Okay,
say.
we have some general ones. Can I get to you at the end of communications?
Yeah, I just didn't know where I should.
Okay, yeah. So now we'll have a roll call from the board secretary and board members.
Dr. Anderson.
Here.
Dr. Bader.
Here.
Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Dr. Buck.
Here.
Dr. Demo.
Here.
Ms. Huff.
Here.
Mr. Colby.
Here.
Dr. Miller.
Here.
Okay. And at this time, we're first going to start communications with a superintendent update. Mr. Johnson?
Well, thank you, Amy. I would like to congratulate and thank 4 of our administrators who are retiring at the end of the school year. This summer, Shelley Buckholz, Mark Feldman, Jean Canals, and Linda Pierce will bid us farewell and start their next chapters. Shelley, the Ferguson Township Elementary principal, has been with the district for 7 years, leading her school community. Among her accomplishments, she served as the lead principal for the district's ELA curriculum and/or program implementation, and started a Ferguson Township Student Ambassador Committee. In addition, she led the charge for social emotional learning for our students and supported the implementation of mindful practices at Ferguson Elementary. Mark Feldman, the Mount Nittany Elementary principal, has been with the district for 19 years as a secondary math teacher and school administrator. He feels most fortunate to have had the opportunity to work in a leadership role with students, families, faculties, and staff of both Mount Nittany Middle School and Mount Nittany Elementary Schools, and is proud of the professional relationships formed with an emphasis on the first-class teaching and learning environment in the district. Of course, we remember his infamous stint as a rooftop camper after a successful fun run. Jean Canals, the Director of Student Services, has been with the district in her role for 17 years. Of her accomplishments, she's most proud of helping implement restorative practices district-wide, building a restorative practices handbook, serving as the pandemic coordinator, leading the revision of the district emergency operations plan, and working to create a stronger system of mental health support. We will always be grateful for all the work she did getting us through the COVID years. Linda Pierce, the Human Resources Executive Director and Compliance and Title IX Officer, has been with the district in her role for 10 years. Over that time, among other achievements, she's made a considerable impact on our district with policy development. One policy that meant the most to her was Policy 100.1, School Climate and Inclusive Excellence. This policy supported and promoted teaching and learning environments in which all students can succeed within the school district. All 4 have made a difference during their time with us, helping our schools grow for the betterment of all students, and they will be missed. Our administration is grateful for their leadership, and we wish them the best in retirement. One last thing, I would also like to congratulate driver education instructor, English teacher Dagmar Wilson for recently conducting her 1,000th successful license road test. Having been with our in-car driver education program since 2015, she just keeps on rolling, teaching our high school students how to be safe drivers. A story about her accomplishment is on the district website. Thank you, Dagmar, for all the valuable work you are doing. That's it for my comment.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And I just want to back up. I neglected to announce at the beginning first to welcome everyone here, and also that the board held an executive session prior to this meeting regarding legal cases, federal court designation number 4.23-CV-01144-MWB, as well as case 19024-00904, as well as discussed real estate, personnel, and student discipline matters. And having that box checked, I'd like to move on to our student representative, Matt Manahan. Welcome, and you have some updates for us?
Yeah, I do. First of all, I'd just like to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Manahil Sabi. I'm a junior at State High, and I'm glad to be here, excited to listen on this discussion and have an opportunity for my voice to be heard. So, for an update on student initiatives, we'd like to say congratulations to 4 State High football players for being named to Pennsylvania Class 6A All-State teams. Linebacker Mike Gall was selected for the writers and coaches' first teams. Punter John Zip and long snapper Gino Paghetti were coaches' first team selections. And wide receiver Tyler Salazar made the coaches' second team. The honors cap outstanding seasons for each of them, and we share their pride in being among the state's elite players. Thank you.
Thanks. And certainly feel free to chime in at any point. If you let us know you'd like to share some information on anything we're talking about tonight, just let me know. We'll be glad to hear from you. Next up, we have legislative update. Jackie, do you have anything to share?
So the legislature was not very busy over the holidays, but I do want to remind everyone that the Basic Education Funding Commission report should drop on Thursday.
Exciting.
It's not written yet, from what I understand, so hopefully it'll happen.
Okay.
Hopefully they will build consensus. That's what I should say. Hopefully they will build consensus and put out a report.
That would be great. Okay, thanks. Next up, we have Center Region Council of Governments. Peter or Gretchen, do you have anything?
Do you have anything?
I do not.
I have 2 items that I wanted to communicate with you all. The first is that the COG will soon be receiving proposals for a regional residential refuse and recycling contract, and that was put out, the bid was put out in November. The residential curbside collection program covers approximately 16,200 households in Benner, College, Ferguson, Harrison, Patton townships. I am on the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee as a non-voting member in the COG. And so if anybody has any input or wants more communication about that, just let me know. And those will be opened January 17th, I believe. So everybody, regardless of the school district, you're going to have a new service possibly for your trash collection. So that was the first thing. And the second item I wanted to communicate is I just thought it would be informative for the district to understand how the SPPA, PPA, will be handled process-wise in the COG. And so what will happen is the committee that I just mentioned, Sustainability, Climate Sustainability Committee, will receive a recommendation about the contract from the Facilities Committee for the power purchase agreement, and then provide comments to the Executive Committee. So they're having it go first through Facilities, then to the Sustainability Committee, and then with all those comments, and then the recommendation from the Facilities Committee to their Executive Committee. So anyway, I just thought that that might be interesting for us because we're going to be doing this very soon ourselves. That's all I have for the COG report.
Okay, go ahead, Peter.
I didn't
Anyway.
think that I had an update, but it does follow on that. Pam Adams, who is the sustainability planner for the region, Donnell Del Corso, who is designated as the representative for the Council of Governments to the power purchase agreement. PPA is power purchase agreement. And I will be doing a video that will be available to all officials and the public to go through what the power purchase agreement is, because it's been this really long process and it has all these different parts to it. And we just want to make everything clear for everyone. And there will be lunch and learns for newly elected officials for the power purchase agreement.
So a video primer will be available.
Correct.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yep.
Gretchen, do you want to share your other miscellaneous?
Yeah, I had one other communications I wanted to share with everyone, and that is that I received a National Fellowship for School Board Leaders from School Board Partners, and they are working to dismantle oppressive systems and ensure all students can thrive in our nation's public schools. They train and support us, so there's 75 people who are going to be in this cohort, to be more effective board members and to pass kids first policies that clear the way for research-based interventions and environments to create better experiences and outcomes for students. And so this was very exciting. I was sort of surprised. I applied, but I wasn't expecting to receive this. So this will be sort of with the support of school board partners and the other 74 people who will be in my cohort. We will meet once a week, Zoom, and then there's a plethora of conferences that they will provide scholarships for me to attend. Unfortunately, the first one I'm unable because I already bought plane tickets over spring break, but it is, they're giving the fellows a scholarship to the Green School Board or Green Schools Conference in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So anyway, hopefully there will be more opportunities like this, and then I can share with you all what I am learning from them. So anyway, thank you.
Great, congratulations.
Thanks.
One last communication and then we're done. Typically this time of year, the board affirms its commitment to the Pennsylvania School Board Association's principles of governance and leadership, and we do so by posting them for the public in the boardroom with our signatures of commitment affixed. So you'll find it over by our flag. PSBA developed these principles into a policy 011, which the board approved at its April 11th, 2022 meeting, and is the set of guiding principles that frames the key work of the board. In adopting this policy, the board affirms its commitment to adhering to these principles and also to use them when evaluating the board's functioning and performance. Therefore, the SCASD School Board of Directors agree to collectively and individually act in accordance with the following principles: advocate earnestly, lead responsibly, govern effectively, plan thoroughly, evaluate continuously, communicate clearly, and act ethically. Details of policy 011 can be found on the district's board docs website. So that concludes communications, unless anyone has any other miscellaneous matters. Okay. So now we have time for public comment. Each individual will be allotted up to 3 minutes for items related to board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. For action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by school code. In addition, if additional time is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after board business is completed or during the next meeting. As a reminder, public comment is a chance for the community members to share their thoughts with the board. It is not a time for the board to answer questions or engage in conversations. You can always email the board at all-board@scasd.org. Is there anyone here in person that would like to make a public comment? Okay. Do we have anyone online remotely that would like to make a public comment? If you would like to, please just raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak through Zoom. Okay, I don't see none for you. All right, seeing no public comment, we'll move on to information reports. We're going to start with the selection of committee chairs. Just prior to that, the board must appoint committee chairs annually. And so agenda item 5A1 is a motion to approve committee chairs for 2024. However, there's a little amendment to this item. Under Facilities and Grounds Committee, Peter Buck unfortunately has some commitments that make it difficult for him to serve as chair, and so Gretchen Brandt is going to step into that role. So the memo should be adjusted as Finance and Audit Committee will be Jackie Huff, Culture, Climate, and Learning Committee, Carlene Crevecore, Facilities and Grounds Committee, Gretchen Brandt, and Policy Development Committee, Ann Demo. So can I have a motion to approve the 2024 committee chairs as amended list on the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay, any public comment on this item?
No.
Okay, we'll have a roll call.
Dr. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Demo?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Colby?
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to culture, climate, and learning. First, we're going to start with a gifted overview and assessment information. Jonathan Klingman is going to provide that information for us this evening.
Evening, everyone. I could probably talk for 6 hours about all of this, so I really cut down. I know, I'm not going to, but I tried to take a lot of information and condense it into what I thought was the most appropriate. So what do you think is best? Do you want me to kind of just go through things quickly and ask questions, or since you had the chance to review everything, do you want to just ask questions? What do you think would be best?
Well, for one, I have some, because some of the slides didn't have all the information and it's just the data tables, I certainly need some.
Sounds good.
background on it.
Then I'll just kind of go through things. How does that sound? So, since we have some new board members, just to kind of go over everything in terms of Chapter 16, quick reminder. State College has had a very up and down relationship with gifted education dating back into the 70s, whereas we were serving students who were mentally gifted through special education, programming changes, work along the community members, then shifted into the learning enrichment model, which didn't really have a lot of program review for several years, which then landed us into compliance monitoring from PDE in 2014-15. At that point, the state had identified that though we had been providing supports for students who were mentally gifted, we were not following Chapter 16, which was developed and passed in 2000. So since then, and since I took over the role, we have really been growing in terms of identification, and as a part of my dissertation, really wanted to take a look at how universal screening supports that entire process and to be as equitable as possible. So just some basic things and reminders about Chapter 16. There's no federal law that protects gifted students. It is states. Each state decides whether they're going to identify SERV, if anything at all. In Pennsylvania, we have a very restrictive IQ. In fact, one of the most restrictive in the country, requiring students to have an IQ of around 130. But again, IQ alone can never be used to fully identify a student with mental giftedness. We do really take a look at masking factors, and given the population shifts within our community, really trying to learn a little bit more about those masking factors and what that means. The identification process is a two-prong approach, so just because a student is mentally gifted, it does not mean that they will qualify for specially designed instruction, the same in special ed. The only difference is that once identified as mentally gifted in a Pennsylvania public school system, they maintain that identification through their graduation from Pennsylvania public schools. So again, we take a look first at prong one: does a student have an IQ that meets that high standard? And then, is there at least one other data piece that suggests that? We really take a look at demonstrated and standardized achievement as one of those requirements, because the others are pretty subjective, so we try to do things that are a little bit more objective in that way. I get a lot of questions from a lot of other school districts. In fact, I just got one today about those students with IQs of less than 130, and the law is pretty clear that a student can be identified as mentally gifted if they have an IQ less than 130, as long as evidence strongly indicates that. So for State College, we would expect that the two that are in green on the screen and at least one of the other areas is met, which 3 out of 5 would be our definition of strongly indicate. You can see that when we started this process back in 14-15, 15-16, we almost had very few students identified as mentally gifted and very few with GIEPs. Through that time, we have continually moving forward through this process. You'll see some gaps in the data. Some of that comes with our switch to Synergy, as well as some of the issues related to COVID and how that kind of messed with our data. But ultimately, in working with our PIMS coordinator, Susan Bailey, I have an estimate that by 26-27 school year, we will kind of be at that time where we have as many students entering gifted programming through universal screening, and then the majority of them also leaving as 12th graders, which does come to about 10% of the school district, or about 650 students. That's high, but it's not high for a populated school system like we are. On average, you'll see across the country about 6 to 7% of students. So when you see a school district that's reporting 0, that's an alert for the state that there's something maybe that's not happening. As a part of the equity plan, we really wanted to dive into how we could make universal screening more equitable. So I did pull some of the research out that I've really used in helping to build my understanding of that, and specifically how minoritized populations are always seems to be underrepresented, and especially if there are not universal screening systems in place. Long history of teachers and parents being identified as poor identifiers of gifted students. It's no one's fault. Without proper professional development and understanding, it's just gifted students no longer look like a perfect wrapped present. A lot of them look very, very different, and that's unfortunately not part of very many student teaching programs, et cetera. And in fact, there are very few universities that even teach anything on gifted education at all. So because of that, we really want to be thoughtful and put a lot of time and energy into these kinds of conversations and see what they mean for State College, but also the advocacy work that I do across the country and the state. Little history of our screening, taking a look at where we were back in 2015-16, and you can see there that one of the issues that through our own processes, we realized that even students with high IQs, a teacher could actually say, no, we're not going to push the student forward to evaluation. Because of the research, we changed that, and that has really been one of the major movements forward to help support better numbers and support of students who are mentally gifted. To where we are now is really diving a little bit deeper into the data and seeing what that means for us, and we can talk about that in just a few moments. For the past 3 years, I do have the data to show that we are screening of the 400 to 500 students in third grade every year. Approximately 52 students are meeting recommendation to move forward to full evaluation. Now, not all of them may qualify for specially designed instruction, because we also are looking that they're working a year or more above grade level as well. But again, IQ and evaluation can still at least hold and support a mental identification through that process. So we have been using for the past several years the COGAT. The COGAT stands for the Cognitive Abilities Test. I work closely with Riverside's Insight, their publisher, their statisticians, and even the author. The most recent author, Joni Lankin, has been helping me not only with my dissertation, but also just through this whole process, because this is where her expertise also lives with this. But the COGAT is broken down into 3 subtests, a nonverbal, a verbal, and a quantification battery. And they have a screener, which we have been using for several years now, and that is one of the subtests from each of these categories. But as a part of this whole process and taking a look at additional data, they had provided us some complimentary full COGAT licenses this year to continue looking at our data to see if that data suggests something different, which I'm excited to be diving into a little bit more, because I think it does. We are a unique school district, and every time I talk to their statisticians, they're just like amazed at the populace and how high some of our students are performing. So specifically related to my dissertation research, I just kind of wanted to show you what we ended up looking at last year was through the screening process, as we created a sample of all of those students who were Black, Brown, and ESL. Those are the 3 areas that in most of the literature are suggesting the number of students who are more underrepresented than others. So of the whole entire sample, this is the group, the 472 students that went through that process, and a little bit more of the breakdown about those who were ESL versus those who were not. So ultimately, I created 2 groups, the non-underrepresented and then the underrepresented group, to compare through this process. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire dissertation because I know CJ would be upset about that, but I just wanted to pull the 2 main ones that are the main conversation pieces related to gifted education, in my opinion. And one of them is taking a look at how English language comprehension and verbal abilities is assessed and what that does for student scores. So you'll see here that there is actually a difference of about 7.8 points between how our underrepresented and our underrepresented students are performing. And this pretty much matches what is out there in the literature as well. So those students who are Black, Brown, and ESL are 7 points to 8 points likely more likely to score less than that. So when we use very strict criteria in identifying students as mentally gifted, those students from underrepresented populations are at a risk for not being selected simply because, that's just the way that they're scoring. So this data matches what we are also seeing in literature as well, and you see that that is also statistically significant. What the COGAT researchers also did was they provided me with an alternative score to their composite on our screening last year, and that's where they actually removed all questions that required English language comprehension. There are kind of wars going on in gifted literature about whether students should be evaluated and administered verbal assessments or nonverbal assessments. The two camps are pretty heated, but the nonverbal group is really saying that culturally and linguistically diverse students should only ever be assessed with nonverbal assessments. There are others that are saying that we can't just throw all students into that regardless of their background, because there are some students with just some innate skills. And I also agree with that. So you can see here that even when we took away questions requiring English language comprehension, some of our Black, Brown, and ESL students on average were still performing 5 points below the white and Asian non-peer or peer group as well, again being statistically significant. So when we take a look, I just pulled this morning, and Deb, thank you for your good catch on that. Data has been a little bit crazy around here, but I thought, you know what, I'm just going to add this in here as well. So there are 3 reportable categories of gifted data to the state of Pennsylvania, and this is changing as we continue to advocate more and more for gifted education. GX is those who are identified as mentally gifted but do not have a GIEP. GY means that they're gifted with an IEP, and then there are 2 categories that we categorize here in State College but are reported to PDE as 1. GS are twice exceptional. That means that they have gifted goals in their IEP, and then GD are twice exceptional that do not have gifted goals within their IEP. So you can see the breakdown there of the different demographic categories, racial categories, and the percent of students that fall within that, and that was as of this morning. This does not include the 50-some students that will be going through evaluation in the next couple of weeks, just to give you a heads up on that. And it's amazing the difference a period makes. How about it, Deb? So thank you for that. So this comparing district enrollment is really taking a look at disproportionality and where that sits in State College as a part of comprehensive planning, gifted assurances. When I bring those to you shortly for submission for comprehensive planning, that is now a requirement that school districts in the state going through that process have to look at disproportionality and gifted identification and seeing what that means for them. So you can see here, specifically when you take a look at the data, the one that does stand out the most to me is our Asian students being overly identified. Again, there's really nothing you can do with that. If the student meets the criteria, they're going to be evaluated and they're going to meet that criteria. But that pretty much matches what we'd expect to see across the research in gifted ed as well. There are other areas of this. I don't want to say that there is a perfect number of what you would expect. Really what I tend to see in the work that I do is about 6% of a school district or whatnot is going to be identified as gifted. How does that directly connect with those other demographic categories and racial categories? That probably has a lot of discussion around that specific piece as well. So I wanted to provide a little bit more information about what the COGAT screener was versus the COGAT Complete. The COGAT Complete is 3 subtests under each of those specific categories, whereas the screener itself is just one of those specific subtests, and there's a little bit more about what the verbal, nonverbal, and quantitative battery means. And then the difference really that the COGAT is proud of with their product is that was never meant to be a gifted screener or a gifted identifier. It was more of an ability profile that would help teachers be able to understand how best to be able to work with students. So what you don't get with the screener is that you get these different profiles. So every student who completes the COGAT Complete also gets a data profile that parents and teachers can use, especially through MTSS process, to better understand how the student's abilities can be used to be best in the classroom. And what they will actually do that they're compiling for us right now is actually making what are known as classroom differentiation lists, where they will actually take all the students that did take the COGAT Complete, they will put them into lists of these kids all learn like this and provide that same type of information for classroom teachers. These are just samples that are pretty standard for that. So what I wanted to really take a moment for you to understand is that this is some of the data that we pulled from the COGAT Complete, which is very, very interesting to me, and I love to nerd out on all of this stuff. So VQN would be the composite of the verbal, quantitative, and nonverbal together, and then each of the subtests separated out individually, and then some of them combined in individual ways. Anything in that green is at that 95th percentile and above. And why I think this data is really important and why I'm writing about it and advocating about it is that I truly believe to be equitable, you can't just say that one type of subtest is enough. So there's, again, research and literature out there that says only CLD students, culturally linguistic diverse, should only take nonverbal assessments. If you were to do a nonverbal assessment and the data would be consistent, if you take a look at some of these areas, and I'll just give you an example. If you look down at the bottom of this, the multiracial and the black students, the data that this is here, the nonverbal scores, we're at a 124 and a 90. And this is out of a typical standard distribution, with 100 being average. You'll see there that the verbal score is at a 123. So at that point, when you think about students who are performing 5 to 7 points below non-minoritized populations, going completely with a nonverbal assessment, at least with SCASD's data, is not something that I would recommend. But then when you also take a look at, for example, the ESL students that are listed up above, you'll see that some of those students with quantification measures and nonverbal measures are substantially higher. I mean, we're talking scores of a 155. I mean, these are very, very high scores. But if you're just relying on verbal assessments, then you can see how those kids would be missed as well. So for me, it's not about the little bit of data, it's about the more data you collect, which again also comes into more assessments, the more chance and potential you have to be a little bit more equitable. But these data points are, in my opinion, very interesting because what I spend a lot of time on a regular basis is talking to parents about math. And we have a lot of students who may not have an IQ of 130 qualifying for gifted need, but when you take a look at potentially their abilities on a quantitative measure such as this, they have really high scores. And at that point, it's really trying to make sure that we have curriculum resources to be able to support them in best practices across the district. So I'm going to stop there real quick. I'll take some questions because a lot of the other stuff will probably come through discussion. So thoughts, questions, things before I get into recommendations.
I just want to make sure I'm interpreting this last slide correctly. Each line of data is an individual student.
Correct.
They're
And I
not
just pulled
averages.
random. No.
So you picked some average, some
Yep,
random.
I just picked some random
And some of
ones.
them are not labeled
Correct, which means that
Which
they
is
would
fine.
not have a demographic
that you're focusing
category.
on.
That, yeah, correct.
Okay, that's what I thought, but just making sure.
Yep.
Thanks.
Any other questions? No? So with future recommendations and things that I'd really like to see SCASD continue to work upon is taking a look at ensuring that given our transient population that new students are also screened as a part of their enrollment within the district. Also taking a look at ensuring that ESL students have multiple opportunities to be screened, especially as they progress within their English proficiency journey. We're already starting to talk about how gifted fits into an MTSS system. So again, it's not just a triangle anymore. We're really looking at a diamond and how that kind of fits into there. Programming for underserved and twice exceptional populations. This is an area that is well under-researched and underdeveloped, especially in the state of Pennsylvania. I don't want to say that we are just going to use one paintbrush stroke and that all students who are mentally gifted get the same programming. In order to truly be equitable, we may need to be looking at the types of needs of our underserved and twice exceptional students a little bit differently, given their unique needs. And again, the more that we are equitable and the more that we open up these doors, what does that do to potential staffing and supporting of that? I mean, there are some school districts that the gym teacher has an open prep period and they're the ones that are writing IEPs, and I know that that's not an area that we will ever get down into. The main issue that I want to make sure that I end with here on today is the fact that in my professional opinion, Chapter 16 of the school code is what is truly inequitable. So given the state's 130 IQ and restrictiveness, we are at a different place to be able to provide supports for students. So at that point, even if we want to continue to do more to be more equitable, we still are working under Chapter 16, which is still requiring a high IQ. We are still working with an unfunded mandate. So again, we receive $0 from PDE on gifted education. So that is also another area. And why I also caution moving towards truly being equitable immediately is because it's really great to lower cut scores and to start identifying more students, but we are already at a critical level of school psychologists in the state that must be a part of the evaluation process. And if you don't have the staff or the resources to be able to provide gifted education services, then you're really not going to be doing anything efficiently or supporting kids in that way. So some of the things to be thoughtful of, lowering cut scores, continuing to support universal screening at each level. This is just a quick show of our data through my dissertation that really showed that students, no matter whether they were taking a nonverbal assessment or picture-based assessment, we saw massive differences in between how students who were from marginalized populations performed. So again, this is just more support where throwing all of your apples into one type of cognitive assessment is really not going to be successful. Again, talking about how IQ, what that means at the state level, equitable funding, what that needs to be done. And truly, like I said, if they're without some sort of funding formula to be able to support gifted education, we're really going to struggle to be able to truly be equitable. I want to end with the fact that PDE was the recipient of a $3.5 million Javits grant, which is the only federal funding for gifted education. And over the next 5 years, we'll be working to provide more professional development to IUs on equity in gifted education. And all school districts are now required to start talking about disproportionality and what that means within gifted education. So it's not going to go away now. Schools are constantly contacting me, asking for where we've been and where we're headed, because they're going to have no choice but to keep up. I'm just hopeful that we, as a district that is well recognized for its gifted programming, whether or not it is to the top tier that I would love it to be, versus at least our practices are in place, there's still a lot of work to do across the state and the district. So,
Thanks, John. Questions? Yeah.
I just had a quick question. What effect, correct me if I'm wrong, you do this screening only at grade 3, is that right? What effect did the pandemic have on kids who were in elementary school at the time that you were doing these assessments?
So we didn't screen during COVID,
Okay.
but what we ended up doing is the next year we screened 2 years, so we would have done third grade and fourth grade. The amount of students historically has been pretty consistent. When we start to talk about cognitive IQ, though around 8 years old is where cognitive IQ tends to stabilize, in my personal opinion, I did not see any massive changes to the number of students who were qualifying for screening or at least to move forward because of the pandemic. Now, is that a potential masking factor? That's kind of gone back and forth, but since cognitive IQ is one of those things that outside influences can somewhat influence it a little bit, but a lot of it is natural abilities and what's been able to, heredity, all that type of stuff. I don't think it made a huge difference, and that's in my personal opinion, at least in SCASD. Now, there may be people that would disagree with me, and I'd be totally fine with that, but I did not see a big difference in the IQ numbers because of COVID.
Any other questions? Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I have a question and a comment. So I opened another tab and now I want to go back to your, where is it? The slide that has some of the recommendations. So it is, this doesn't have page numbers. So based on current language in Chapter 16 to meet gifted and gifted identification, yes. Then there is, where is it? There's a recommendation that you have on professional development for underserved populations. And it's a little, I don't know, it's sort of a generic, yes, there it is. This 19, page 19. Thank you. How would you do that?
So that's a great question. I am certainly not an expert in this area. There are a lot of other people that are. So I collaborate and work with PDE pretty regularly. I present with them pretty regularly and know a lot about what's happening. I am hopeful that what will be coming through the Javits grant funding and the professional development around equity that I know will be coming through that grant program are going to be turnaround trainings that our IUs will have that we'll be able to also capitalize on. There are also several other things that are going to be happening, including statewide consultation groups with school psychologists as well as other researchers in the gifted education field that will be collaborating with PDE and helping us to have better conversations with that. I have been attending several conferences and working with some of the gifted fields leading Twice Exceptional researchers as well. And again, it's hard because every state does things slightly differently. So whereas one student may be Twice Exceptional in Virginia, that's not necessarily the same. So the programming that they got in one state may not be able to be carried over directly, or even a gifted student in that end. And that's really, really tough to kind of match that. So it's really like the national type of stuff that's happening, but then also ensuring that we're meeting Pennsylvania's criteria as well.
So So part of your answer just now, there's like you and what you're doing. Then there's PDE, this other entity, and what it would even say should happen regarding this would be influenced, possibly constrained by the law. But you didn't say anything about the population of who would receive the professional development here. So, and you didn't say, well, I would get that. Would it be what group of teachers?
It's a good question. So I would want the school psychologists and our gifted support teachers to continue to receive the targeted professional development around what best practices would be in serving those from minoritized populations as well as those from Twice Exceptional, and that's an extensive amount of work, especially because even with Twice Exceptionalities, we're talking about students, for example, with emotional disturbances that need something very different but are mentally gifted versus those that are on an autism spectrum disorder and their unique needs. Sometimes students are Twice Exceptional because they have a speech IEP only in gifted support. So there's a lot of different types of needs, and that's where trying to develop exactly what best practices would be for those individual groups is really, really tough. But we want to continue those conversations with the experts that are out there so that we can try to start being thoughtful of, okay, if we are able to identify more Black students, for example, are the services that we're providing to general gifted students in terms of pull out or push in and enrichment support services, et cetera, is that the same type of support services that are needed for X population, Y population? ESL students are going to probably need something very different because again, they're still, traveling through their language proficiency journey, but I don't want to discount them because technically under the law, they may have a very, very high IQ and qualify for support services.
So I have one more follow-up question and then my comment. So am I right in understanding then that the professional development that you could receive now might help you now, but also inform you about the limitations and the practices that are constrained by the law and result in you wanting to advocate for a certain set of changes to that law?
I feel pretty confident that I know what's happening across the state of PA and what we need to do differently. The issues are if we are to be more equitable, whether that's Pennsylvania law changing or SCASD saying, for example, we want to lower the IQ score
Sure.
or do something different. We will need more professional development in the school district to be able to ensure that we're meeting those unique needs and potentially staffing. Because if we're going to start opening up a door of lowering IQ to be 125 or 120, we're now going to be adding substantially more students to our caseloads.
The curve. Okay.
Correct.
Great.
yeah.
And then I guess my kind of editorial comment or some of the things that I think we might want to think about as a board, and this is just paying attention to the changes in legal landscapes and the ramifications of court decisions that the Students for Fair Admissions case, the Harvard and North Carolina, and the ramifications of the undoing of affirmative action and what that does for in the trickle down to other educational systems and its impact on other sort of equity kinds of decisions. I don't know what's happening out there. but there could be a long-term creep into these kinds of like special service programs for equity treatment.
Any other board
Thank
members?
you.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one observation. I think, and I did have a question initially about who was receiving professional development, whether it was the gifted department primarily, and I just, I think we also have to talk about and think about general district-wide professional development on these subjects, because if we're using sometimes teacher recommendation to bring these students forward, that's important. And generally, I think many teachers would benefit from, having more knowledge in these all the time in their classroom for a variety of reasons to benefit the students, for classroom management. And I know we're working on culturally responsive teaching, and so that will be a part of that kind of professional development. But I think when it comes to twice exceptional students in particular, I think we have a long way to go, and having all of our staff and teachers really have a deep understanding for some of those students.
We do have a foundation grant program from a former gifted teacher that does allow me to take general education teachers to gifted conferences each year. So that's something that we started this year, and I'm hopeful when I continue to budget for the professional development, because it is limited. But I will say that having our gifted teachers be a part of the conversations at the table with gen ed teachers has really helped to change mindsets and shift understanding about these needs. But we are still a long way away, but we are definitely much further ahead than a lot of other places in the state.
Yeah. And I actually said that wrong. I don't mean not just twice exceptional students, but whatever their masking exceptionality is, I think is something that
Totally agree.
That was what I was talking about in terms of additional PD. So yeah, that's my only comment. Any other last minute things? Okay. Thanks very much,
Thank you.
Jonathan. So next up, we have an update on the annual data report schedule, and the assistant superintendents are going to join us to go over that. Oh, and Chris Merritt too. Welcome.
Good evening. At our last CCL executive meeting, Carlene had asked us at the time to bring up the calendar that we worked through beginning in the 22-23 school year. And for all of the new members, what kind of came out of that is there were various reports that the board wanted to see based on data. And prior to last year, when Deirdre, Chris, and I worked through it, we didn't really have a month-to-month schedule of those data reports. So what we did is attached to your agenda, and I can plug in here, I guess it is here so other people can see it, is last year we had to make multiple changes. If you recall, Future Ready was not released in November, and then it went to December, and so we kind of made it a working report, but we did update it to the reports that we did in 22-23. So I went ahead and left those when we worked through this. And then we went back starting in July 1 we're just now showing this because, again, since Carlene brought it up, but we thought we would show the comparison, what we would like to do in the future then. As we work through these plans, we did have our directors take a look at this, make sure we weren't missing anything. Is each June we would make a recommendation for next year with the understanding of data is available at different times and you never know when there's going to be a delay or when we don't have a report. So some of these, of course, are subject to change. Any questions?
It was helpful to see the comparison, so I appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think we're all three kind of part of this, but Chris is kind of presenting on the next one, so we'll stay here in case there are questions on our end.
So excited about this next one. I can't tell you. So yeah, I would like to bring to you the proposal tonight for an assistant director for curriculum for our office. So this year, CJ asked me to assume the K-12 role solo, as you know, and to kind of get the lay of the land and develop this new position that didn't exist before. And I think that's part of the challenge, is trying to do the things that I did before and the things that the elementary director did before as one human, and the new things that were added to my plate that people aren't always aware of. And being one person, I can't be in 3 meetings at the same time. And that's what happens frequently in my calendar. So I have to make a decision on which thing to attend. I think there's a lot of innovation, a lot of exciting things happening. And I have seen a number of things this year that I've been able to have a K-12 lens on, which has been super helpful. And so I understand the value of having a K-12 one person. I also know that the capacity of that one person is so limited in a district this size. We did some research and looked at high-performing districts in Pennsylvania, and not one of them has less than 2 district administrators in their office. Most of them have far more than that. But I'm proposing 1 assistant director for next year, starting July 1. I think that the number of changes sometimes that come from PDE and legislation, they're 2 different entities where our changes come from, is always really tricky to keep on top of, as well as innovating and creating new opportunities for students and teachers. And that's where I could really use some help. So, yeah. I think the memo kind of spells out a lot of it. I'd be happy to answer questions. The position would anticipate to start July 1st and be part of next year's budget.
Any questions? Dr. Anderson?
So I guess my question is, like, what is the budgetary impact? Because when we went, and we discussed this a little bit in leadership, so I just feel like it's worth it for the public. When we went from a 612 director and a K5 director to the 1 position, there was some cost savings that we then used to hire administrators in other positions. So now we're adding back in an administrator. So the net effect on the budget, I'm assuming that's going to be part of the budgetary ask. Is there still some savings left over from that? Like,
So
talk about the budgetary impact.
Sure, and I probably have, because I have worked elementary more and have a general understanding, and Randy can certainly correct me at any point if I'm wrong. We originally talked about adding an administrator in elementary, but we chose to go with dean positions last year. So they are on the SCAA, they are part of the still SCAA 190-day employees. So we didn't, to my knowledge, with the collapse of that position, add administrative, but we did add deans. What we would like to do is look at rolling those deans into, since they are 190, they are being paid out of the elementary budget, but this position would really come from keeping those deans, but also looking at elementary total number of positions and pushing one of those into a curricular role, if that makes sense. So when we didn't hire an administrator, we did put 2 deans, but I think we can still utilize those in the total number of professional positions in elementary and not lose and still gain this.
Okay, thank you. That's
Maybe, did I do okay with that? Okay.
Okay, I think it's really important, and I think there's a role the curriculum office has on translating curriculum to boots on the ground in the classroom. So I think that it makes a lot of sense that more than 2 eyes is probably needed to make that happen with fidelity. So I can understand that.
Thank you.
Quickly, I just want to thank you for taking on the role, because it was enormous, and and doing what you could with what you had. So thanks.
Chris has stepped in a couple different places in the last 2 years. We
Yes.
really appreciate her.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Facilities and Grounds portion of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Brown, Ms. Yoder, and Mr. Fisher are going to supply us with some updates on the district-wide facility master plan and Mount Nittany Elementary project.
Why is this not working? Thank you. I believe that Mr. Straub and his associate, Ms. Renna, are also joining us virtually this evening from Crabtree, Robar and Associates. So I'm going to pass this off to Mr. Fisher and let him lead you through the PowerPoint until Mr. Straub takes over.
Okay, so we're talking about the Mount Nittany Elementary, kind of the design evolution. This is more on the site plan versus the action later this evening, which is focused more on the actual floor plan, kind of within the walls, right? I should note that the document on the action item later has a little bit of a different of a site plan versus what we're going to show you now and our kind of latest evolution of those plans. I'm going to walk through that, and then Crabtree then will kind of step in and kind of go through some of the Park Forest middle kind of options we are looking at, and then kind of go through kind of next steps in the process. Okay. So right now, this is, so I should note that we completed our survey, all right, of the grounds, kind of looking at the topography and some of the challenges at Mount Nittany L. We've discussed this kind of bus/parent pickup loop many times, and historically it's kind of been around one of the soccer fields. So what we're finding through the survey is that there's actually room to kind of shrink that loop down, therefore saving some costs, right? As well as adding some parking. Some of the other advantages, the fields actually fit kind of the same as they are currently. So they fit a little nicer, as well as we can eliminate one of the concerns that we had was having that loop around in between the fields with children running back and forth and cars going through, right? So we've eliminated that risk as well with this current design. In addition, the bottom baseball or softball field, it would kind of maintain its spot where it is. We have to shift it just a little bit so we can cut down costs there. And actually the orientation of that field is up to standards based on it's a national, forgive me the acronym, it's a national softball or baseball standard as far as field orientation. So the field on the right of your screen, right now would stay the same. In addition, as Mr. Brown had pointed out, to the bottom left of the screen, we do see a lot of kids out phys ed in that lower left-hand corner. So we're looking at, as we will have to do some work in that area, so we're going to try to maintain kind of a playable area as well so that we have more access, as much access as possible to in a phys ed space. In addition, in your upper left-hand corner, you'll see that we've discussed kind of what we call the loop field, which would be a temporary kind of a grass endeavor to make up for the laydown yard in which we would need to take up, one of the soccer fields that are currently there. So,
so this is the laydown area, and so this field, and this is used for recess now. But what we're going to need is we're going to need an actual playing surface during the construction period. So we're going to be looking to make some renovations or some refurbishments to this field this summer in order for it to be available for next spring, spring of 25, when construction would begin, or in the summer of 25 when construction would be going on, and this would be a later.
Would those be permanent since?
I'm sorry?
Would those be permanent, the refurbishments and?
Then that would improve our field space, yes, on this campus.
I should note as well, with this orientation of that loop, we do now have angled parking that we can fit in there, so increased parking. And the other thing it really does for us is it allows cars to come in and then come back out that loop and then park in the large lot adjacent to Mount Nittany Middle. Whereas before the other loop, they would have to go back out onto Brandywine and come back in to park in that lot. So this was, like I said, it was a recommendation by our civil engineers during our field surveys, and we like it.
So that's the rationale for the different, this is more updated than what you're actually approving. We're more concerned about what you're approving later in the meeting of the actual building. But even the building may have some modifications. We're only in what we would equate to about a 30% design at this point in time. Move on to the next.
Yeah, moving on, it's just more of a close-up view of the same graphic. Like I said, from our perspective, it's important to note, like I said, the fields can kind of stay, where they are, and we can decrease costs with this kind of truncated loop, and then keeping the one softball/baseball field kind of the same orientation as well. So.
Mike? This loop looks awesome. This might be a question of no consequence, but what are like the shadowy parts of like? Do you know what I'm talking? Like, yes.
yeah.
So what are these?
Trees.
Those are
Trees.
trees. Okay. Thank you.
Trees. And I should note, we don't envision taking any of those trees out as of now.
So they're shadows of the trees.
Correct.
Yeah. I have one question on I really like this new loop because I was concerned about the loop going around a field. And I may be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I think it's in your next slide, you talk about the receivables, and it reminded me that currently at the high school, when parents go through the drop-off loop, you have an issue sometimes because there's a truck that is trying to drop stuff off during drop-off time. So can you tell me where the receivables section of this loop is, and is that going to be an issue?
So
Or-
yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Receiving would be in the bottom part of that parking
Okay.
lot. So right now we have the dumpsters, recycling positioned there, as well as any deliveries from food service.
Great. So the truck can get all the way out of
It'll go all the way out
That's
of the loop.
awesome.
Yes.
That's great. Thank you.
This isn't a postage stamp sized site as the high school is.
The high school drop-off loop leaves a little to
The
be
campus
desired.
is a postage stamp.
So, yeah.
So again, this is our latest iteration of kind of the site plan for Mount Nittany-El, and as we continue to revise, we'll keep you posted. But anything else on Mount Nittany-El? Questions?
Peter?
Does anything about the use of, does any of the change in the footprint that we haven't seen before, including the deployment of, folks into like this field, right? The soccer field there, the playing field up there? Yeah.
This one?
Yeah. Does any of this do anything to the recertification of the building for LEED?
Not as of now, no. Not that we are certainly aware of. I mean, we're not laying artificial turf anywhere or anything like that, so.
Okay. So I'll just get this started, and then we'll turn things over to Jeff and Madison if he wants. I want to explain that the Park Forest, the property that, let me start with, the property that the district owns is where we have been focusing our efforts on possible designs for a middle school. Obviously, site number one is currently where the Park Forest Middle School is located. Site number two is property adjacent to the Ha track, which was originally owned by the Ha family. There is much information, as I'm learning as recently as this evening, from about different pieces of the Ha family properties that are located in Patton Township. There are tennis courts. To get into this property, go onto this property, you use Little Lion Drive. It is adjacent to Circleville Park. And so this is a property where we've asked Crabtree to look at a possible site for a school. The third parcel is just below, from a topography standpoint, the Park Forest Elementary School, which is up on Amblewood. If you go down School Drive, you find the swimming pool, and this is Douglas down here. So there is a piece of land here also in between Douglas. So in between Douglas and the Park Forest Elementary School along School Drive, where there is another piece of vacant land or wooded land, that is a possibility. That because of the timing of the request to Crabtree and also some research that needs to be done by both the district and the architects and engineers, we don't have an understanding yet whether a design is possible for this piece of land for you tonight. But we just wanted to give you an idea of what we are doing to use our resources that the district already owns. Obviously, site number 1 would be a renovation and new construction similar to the high school. However, it is a very constrained property. And as we bring forward with more information, these 3 parcels, we will be providing you challenges and opportunities with each site. And then at some point, there will also have to be dollars and cents associated with those as well. Parcel 2 or site 2 would be a completely new building, and then the same with parcel 3. So Jeff, did you want to go ahead and speak further about these 3 sites?
I can, Randy. And are you on, I don't see the slide up on the screen. So are you on slide 4 or 5 right now?
I'm on 5, if that's all right.
That's fine. So just for orientation purposes. So as Randy mentioned, graphically, we're trying to show those 3 potential site locations that are currently owned by SCASD, which will help expedite the process. So really, studying additions or renovations or potentially 2 new construction options, whether it's on the number 2, the haul track, or the wooded lot between Park Forest Elementary and Park Forest Middle School, which it requires a little bit more investigation as we've started discussing with the civil engineer for the project. So if we move forward to slide number 6, and what we're starting to do is we don't have everything solved today. We're really starting to do test fits site-wise, site analysis for each of the locations. And the idea is not only will these continue to evolve both at the site level, but also floor plans. And then ultimately, this will we'll be able to bring this both for engagement with the community meetings, very similar to what we did with the elementary schools and the high school for discussions. So option number 1, we're looking at additions and renovations to Park Forest Middle School existing. And then you can see the new construction option across Valley Vista. We're starting to look both how could we locate a building. We're using a prototypical building and looking both at drop-offs, bus loops, play areas, how could those be located on site. And we have had preliminary discussions on new construction on the wooded site adjacent to Park Forest Elementary School and Middle School. We go forward to slide number 7. And what we're going to start doing this and sort of set up a framework for each as we start moving forward, both at board presentations as well as with community, is talking about the advantages and challenges for each. We're not at the stage for putting budgetary numbers to each right now, but starting the discussion. So obviously, advantage of the existing site is the ability to utilize an existing facility. Okay, that idea of the most sustainable building is a building that's existing. But the question is, can that existing building be utilized for an educational model when the building was built in the 1970s era. Okay, so that's the challenges of reconfiguration of the existing building to accommodate the modern educational model. Okay, also limited acreage to allow contractors to work around the students, both for laydown and staging and phasing. There's going to be quite a large amount of work occurring, and we have to be very sensitive that we're not in the business of building buildings. We're in the business of educating students during that construction period. So is it feasible to have that occurring, the construction occurring, and what is the break line of having too large of an effect on the education occurring during that same time period? Okay. And then looking at where is parking, how do we accommodate grading challenges on that site as well as adjacent properties? And then also the challenge of, while it's a limited site, the existing Park Forest Middle School is a one-story building, so it's not a compressed footprint. It's a very sprawling building. So is really that the most efficient building to be utilized in moving forward for district acreage? Okay. The next is we looked at slide number 8 is new construction across Valley Vista Drive. So the advantages of this is a new facility allows for flexibility, so we can fully integrate the district's vision for an educational program at the middle school level. We're going to, and as we've talked at some previous meetings, not just looking at Park Forest, but really talking Park Forest, Mount Nittany, what is SCASD's direction and goals to move middle school secondary education in the future. And obviously a new facility can fully execute that. So that's a strong advantage to that, okay? Construction would be remote to the students. We obviously would be across Valley Vista. So not only would we not be working around the students, but that improves the construction schedule for the contractors because they don't have the provisions of working around the students. They can reduce the overall construction schedule for the project. And in the current construction market, there is a lot of construction work occurring right now, and we actually even saw this on the elementary school projects. New construction is always more attractive to contractors than additions and renovations, especially around education. So there's that advantage of being remote from the students. And then, as I mentioned before, with the additions and renovations, working with a one-story building, in this scenario, we could go with a multi-story building, which would compress the footprint of the building. Okay. Challenges would, there is existing infrastructure for the current Park Forest Middle School. So we would not, in this scenario, we would be not only building the new building, but all the site infrastructure that would be required for that. Okay. And with each of these options, this is really just starting the process this evening for discussion to hear all from you. We've had discussion with the administration that these advantages and challenges will evolve as we start moving forward for the overall discussion. And then hopefully eventually the selection of what direction to move forward. Moving forward to slide number 9. And while we just very preliminarily have laid out option 1 and option 2, we started, the goal originally was to have just a preliminary fleshed out design also for option 3. However, there's some challenges that we need to investigate a little bit further before we bring anything forward at the board level. Specifically because while there is some substantial site acreage that's owned by SCASD between the two buildings, so proximity to both Park Forest Elementary School and the existing middle school. Another advantage is if we would take over this part of the campus that is owned by SCASD, we could expand the existing overall site acreage that's not currently being utilized for education. So that will expand both circulation, safety and security, playfield locations, opportunities. But there's some challenges that, similar to option 2, we would have to be extending site infrastructure into this location. Some other concerns is this is a heavily wooded location. It's a very sloped site. So you have the concerns with removing all the wooded location, that part of the campus. And then how do we incorporate a building on a sloped site? It is achievable, but it is a potential challenge. We haven't evaluated the cost for that. We're just starting that process. But those are some of the things that we're going to be evaluating. The other concern is currently, as Mr. Brown mentioned, School Drive crosses the current campus between the wooded site and Park Forest Middle School and Park Forest Elementary School. And so first, we're starting to investigate just ownership of School Drive. It's originally built by the school district. It appears that there's been shared ownership now with the township potentially. And then what might we need to do to potentially relocate that or change its configuration on the campus so that we don't have a drive occurring right across from the main, potentially the main entrance of the building for safety and security. So those are some of the challenges that we're going to be investigating. We hope to bring that forward to you in the next month once we get some of those answers, talking with the municipalities for the project. Okay. Right now, those are the 3 main options that we're investigating. Again, the goal is to try to work within the existing State College Area School District owned property in that vicinity for the direction for Park Forest Middle School in the future. Okay. Mr. Brown, we do have the slides for next steps. I didn't know if anybody at the table there wanted to sort of step in.
I'll take that,
Great.
Jeff.
Okay.
So, actually, no, Mike's going to take that. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't follow this plan. My fault.
So for Mountain Indy Elementary, next board meeting will have 3D renderings, both internal and external. We hope to have the budget kind of a first hash out, right, for everybody. And then we're going to start scheduling kind of internal design meetings, furniture, fixtures, that kind of stuff with staff over the next month. And then my office will be having meetings with Crabtree and their sub-consultants about the mechanical, electrical, plumbing fixtures as well. Getting into the facilities master plan, we're still doing facility assessments, so their group is still coming in. We're going through buildings. We did meet with Pam Adams, Center County, regarding our greenhouse gas evaluation. So there's a third-party consultant on that. So we're all on the same page. And when we're gathering data, it's apples to apples to what the county is doing. And then soon meetings will be set up for kind of setting that secondary programming for Park Forest Middle. In addition to what's not on here is that we will be putting forth a plan for stakeholder engagement for Park Forest Middle. Hopefully by the next board meeting we'll have that kind of hashed out on what that engagement looks like, and then at least a tentative schedule over the next several months. So, questions, concerns?
One final item that has been discussed, I think, before, but Mr. Fisher, Mr. Vigilion, and myself also talked with Baker Tilly, our audit firm, and they have an arm that may be able to help us with pursuing funding and available grants through the Inflation Reduction Act as well. And so they are getting on board with getting familiar with our different projects, especially this one, and so we'll, as well as Mountain Nittany Elementary School. So depending on how well those conversations go, I'm hoping that at the next meeting we'll have a recommendation for you to authorize us to engage with them on an official basis for at least some of our initial projects. We just don't believe that we have the appropriate manpower skilled in that area. And so we would like to use a third party and believe that, and reached out to our auditors who had an arm already. We asked them was, do you know of anyone that could be able to assist us? And they said, well, yes, we have an arm that can help you with that.
Yeah, I've read quite a bit about how complex, and there's a lot of opportunities, but the applying appropriately in order to be rewarded is really complicated.
Correct.
Yeah, that's been
So
a complaint very widely.
Right. So I think a lot of the takeaways for tonight is that we have some more detailed information to provide to you in the near future for Mount Nittany Elementary. Our commitment is to bring at least monthly updates for you, but as Mr. Fisher mentioned, there will be new information for Mount Nittany Elementary at the next meeting. In addition, at the following meeting in early February, we hope to have information on the facilities assessments for all of our facilities, as well as updates regarding the greenhouse gas evaluation. And then also, just wanted to let you know that Crabtree is going to be working with our instructional side of the house at the secondary level on that plan. And then Mr. Fisher and I hope to map out a community engagement plan and schedule, verifying with Crabtree that our expectations and their expectations for that plan can be met. And then we want to bring that to you all for your input, as Mr. Fisher said, and then get that, once we're all on the same page, then map that out and get that published.
Great. Any other questions from the board? Yeah, Gretchen?
I have 4 questions, so if somebody has fewer than that, I can
Go ahead.
wait.
I do, but I will go after you.
Okay. Okay.
Just go ahead.
So my first question is, so is it definitely determined that the 3 sites are the 3 possibilities? There's not going to be more than those 3?
Those are the 3 possibilities on currently owned district land.
Okay.
If the board or an idea comes forward in the process for another property or another area, that we would need some direction because we don't own anything else that is a viable option.
Okay. And then my second question is I guess it's number 2, the current location. Is that number 2?
That's number 1.
Number 1. Is number 1, is the site problematic, or currently all of the issues we've been hearing about for so long with Park Forest Middle, are those building issues but not site issues, or is it both?
It's both. So drainage is a big challenge. It's probably one of the largest challenges with that space, and not just where the school was located, but it just gets kind of worse as you go down to the playing fields.
So with, I don't have the numbers up in front of me, but with the wooded area adjacent to the elementary school, would that site have the same drainage issues? Or no?
It's much higher in elevation.
So no, it would not.
It would not.
Okay. And then third, this is something that Peter and I have talked a lot about, and I think many of us have, but I didn't see it in the presentation. In terms of challenges for across the street from Valley Vista, that would obviously include an additional cost in terms of students crossing Valley Vista. So whether that would be a bridge or a tunnel or some type of way to make it possible for students to cross that street safely. And so because it is applicable, I think, that's just something that we need to be aware of in terms of crossing the street versus one of the other 2 site possibilities where crossing the street obviously would not be applicable.
Gretchen,
So-
I don't mean to interrupt. Do you mean crossing because of students we have designated as walkers?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I just don't want the public to think there'll be school things on both sides of the street. That's not the intent in any of these sites.
No, I meant students
Just students who are
crossing
walk-
Valley Vista.
For walking purposes.
Yes.
To school.
When I say crossing, I mean walking or biking, or skateboarding or
I just meant for
scootering.
arrival and departure from school as a, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not following, but.
No, I
But
like,
like
because right
pedestrian
now
things.
there's fields there, and sometimes students go over to use the field space there. So
Right,
they
it's already
cross-
happening,
They cross during the
but
day.
it would be even more if we moved the school across the street, so. But I know Peter had one too, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that student pedestrians getting to school or riding their bikes to school, leaving school, the hills on either side is, you know, I'm sure we know. I used to live on Galen Drive right there, and people fly down Valley Vista. They fly. And so I know, you know, our former board president, you know, she lived up the street, and I think her kids walked to school. So that those pedestrian kids, I think that's definitely something for safety purposes that we'd want to think about. Yeah, and that was another challenge. Yeah.
The other thing, Peter, is that road at that particular location on Valley Vista was recently widened. And so cars are going even faster now because it's wider now.
And they put in bicycle infrastructure along the side, so there is, I mean,
There's traffic.
there's traffic. Yeah. And I don't want to be like, oh my God, it's this insurmountable problem. It's a totally surmountable problem. It's just planning, and I think that it's appropriate
Hasn't
for us
been
to
noted
name it.
To date.
Correct.
And it's appropriate for us to talk about it publicly so that the community knows that we're aware.
For sure. I think the other is that on number 3, so Mr. Fisher just said, yep. So when Ms. Brandt said, so is it the drainage or is it the old building? And you said it's both. And so then you said that we would not have the same drainage issues here, but we would have different issues at this site because of the slope.
Correct.
Here, right? And then other changes that would have to be made here that would be pretty significant. And it also, you know, obviously, we haven't done the geotechnical work for this, but we would be moving a really considerable amount of earth to get a school there. And I guess the other thing, and this is just, you know, having done nothing, only thought about this site a few times, is that there is also an ephemeral stream at the bottom of this, at this property line, behind the houses, and that would be impacted as well. You know, I'll just go ahead and say this. This is my least favorite of the options. Obviously, trees are a big part of my calculation. That would be a huge tree removal, and also like it's just a lot of earthwork.
Should note as well with that location that there would be substantial work below in our current, where the current site is, and then the fields as well, because now we're taking impervious grounds, trees and brush, and making it pervious. So there would be substantial work down below at a lower elevation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's squishy on wet days.
Your word,
Yeah.
not mine.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, okay. No, I appreciate this a lot. Thank you.
Aaron, you had a question?
Yeah, I actually had 2 questions. So for the first one, for the the first option, the existing school, it's not possible to add a second story to the building. Is that correct? Because it seems like the plan as presented is it's a 1-story building on that site.
It's possible, sure, but it would have to remove the first story to put more structural steel in, I'm sure.
And the other question I had about the second, the one across the street there. This may be a question that you're not able to answer, but would you anticipate putting in a traffic light at that intersection before the school?
That's not something that we could unilaterally decide. That's something that we would have to engage both PennDOT and the township.
That's kind of what I figured. Is it possible for the entry point to be further up the road. I'm not totally familiar with the layout, but if it were connected to Amblewood, for instance, I don't know how far the property goes.
Shorter answer is no.
Okay.
We have basically a right of way through the first kind of part of that land.
Okay.
Off of the main road, off of Valley Vista, and then before it opens up into the 18 acres.
I see. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry. Yes, Deb.
Okay. Just piggybacking on what Aaron asked about the existing site, if I'm remembering correctly from my tours, we currently have classrooms in the existing building that don't have windows. Is that right? Right. So I'm hopeful that if we were to go with the existing site, like that would be rectified. Like you were saying, it's a one-story building. It's inefficient, but like at Mount Nittany, there are those interior courtyards so that you could have windows. Like, obviously we're not very far into the design process and we have to pick it, but that's just something on my mind that wherever we build, I'm hoping that our classrooms can have windows.
I want you to be cognizant that we have kids that are getting educated in that building. So the
Yeah.
amount of, and there's no place for trailers or anything like that.
Right.
Because it's limited on parking spots. So it would be very difficult to add stories or change the floor plan dramatically when doing the extension or renovating that piece of property.
Yeah, Gretchen.
Sorry, I said I had 4 and I forgot
okay.
one. I asked 3, so I just wanted to ask my 4th,
Go ahead.
if that's okay. Okay, so my 4th question was just in terms of the middle school secondary educational program development, which is part of the district-wide facility master plan, obviously directly pertains to Park Forest Middle. There was a committee that was investigating middle school educational models. Like they visited several different middle schools throughout Pennsylvania. This was before the pandemic. And they were, the goal, I think ultimately, was to make recommendations based on the research that they were doing. So I was just thinking in terms of when that particular conversation happens, that it might be a good idea to just have that conversation with those folks who went and did that. That's all.
Yeah. I was on that committee, and unfortunately, there weren't a lot of concrete conclusions reached before the pandemic hit. There were some visitations to some programs, but a lot of what we discussed was really more schedule oriented rather than physical space oriented. So I think it's a appropriate question to should we engage with them, but and certainly other administrators could weigh in, but my experience on that committee was largely really about programmatic things that didn't necessarily have particular physical requirements, unless you were going with like a STEM program or something like that would need laboratory space or something like that.
Yeah, and I understand, I mean, that makes a lot of sense what you just said, but I also know that there were people on that committee who are, for lack of a better term, experts in middle school pedagogy. And so just in terms of getting input from those folks who not only looked at these other programs, but also sort of do this for their entire career. I have a couple names in mind that I know, they were on that committee and they would. So I guess that's more what I was thinking rather than scheduling. So anyhow, thank you.
Okay. Nothing further on facilities then? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And
Thank you.
so we can move on to, we have 2 updates from finance and audit. Sounds great. So first, we're going to start with the budget update. Okay. Oh yeah, from the state budget. March finally wrapped up. How many months late, Randy? Yeah. That might be a record, I think, in recent history at least.
So, there is lots of information, much of it.
Is your microphone on?
Sorry. There's lots of information here. Some of it definitely applies to us, some of it does not. That applies in more ways than some others. So I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly with you. There's multiple acts that came into play in formulating our entire state budget that, as we talked about, occurred over about 6 months, or at least 6 months late. So there was mental health grants, there's safety and security grants, targeted safety grants, environmental repairs, and then some other things that are hopefully going to help with educator support, and EITC and OSTC funding. The mental health grants, there's $100 million. $90 million will be used directly for grants to schools, $5 million for training of school-based mental health professionals, $5 million for school-based mental health internships. The school district will receive $100,000 plus an ADM adjusted amount, and then IUs, CTCs, and charter schools will receive a different amount. The long story here is that PCCD is meeting this week to approve the guidelines, and the funds are being committed by March 31st. Safety and security grants, there's $45 million to schools. $5 million will be used for a PCCD grant program, and school districts are expected to receive between $30,000 and $45,000 based upon their ADMs. And the remainder, that $5 million, will be distributed competitively. Again, PCCD is meeting on this week, and funds are being committed by March 31st. So we've been waiting for 6 months. Not that I'm going to be a negative person here, but we're going to get told sometime after this week, and then we have to have the funds committed by March 31st. So, but we didn't know how to commit them because we don't know the rules to the game.
So they didn't adjust the deadline at all?
Correct. Targeted safety grants are $20,700,000, and this goes to various other eligible recipients, including law enforcement agencies for school resource officers, other approved vendors, other school entities, non-public schools, and municipalities. This is to non-public schools is $14.5 million. And this is
So Randy, wait, it was 14 million to non-public schools, but only 6 million to public schools, or is it
Other
to other
applicants.
applicants? Okay, thanks.
So we will work with the borough to see if there's any way that we can work together and partner. We have a great relationship there, so I don't have any doubts that we can't. However, this is persistent. These monies are going to go to persistently dangerous schools and schools with the greatest needs related to safety and order. So I'm not sure how competitive we would play in that environment. Not to say that's a bad thing.
That's okay with us. Yeah.
Yes, which is great.
Right. Okay. Environmental repairs, $75 million. This is a new program, and this is going to be a competitive-based grant, and we will be watching this very heavily as well to see if there's any project that we can, or projects that we can submit for. This differs from PlanCon, and PDE must release the application forms in at least 60 days before the beginning of the application period. Other funding fixes, BEF and Social Security funding fix, they're separated to match the General Appropriations Act. School lunch and breakfast reimbursement dollars can now be released to pay for the difference between the reimbursement rate and for free lunch and reduced price lunch, and then also providing universal free breakfast. Other funding fixes is related to IU special education funds, some Act 33 extensions, Again, this is really getting away from our funding and budgetary needs, but I thought that I would at least share this information with you so that you could refer back to it, as well as the public would have an opportunity for this information. Educator Pipeline Support Grant is for student teachers and cooperating teachers. EITC and OSTC funding was an increase of $150 million. And it shows how the different types of funding have changed over the year.
Yeah, primarily that funding went to scholarships,
Private
which
schools.
were private schools, as opposed to the EITC funds that we occasionally benefit from through the foundation, which are targeted for public schools and specific types of programs. Those were not areas of growth.
Correct. So, public school facility grants, $100 million. And again, this is going to be a competitive situation, so we'll look to see if that's something that we can take advantage of. Declined allocation reporting. And then this is something that PDE will be working with folks on. And then other education bills that had an impact in this process. So Jackie, how bad did I flub that up? Okay, I'm sure you have even more information than that. But. Okay, good. All right. So moving into our budget update for tonight. And this is for us for the 24-25 budget year. Mr. Vigileone, take it away.
Okay, so as we look and go through this, it's real brief. We are transitioning now away from the audits and the year-end reporting for 23, and we get the break and jumping into year-end 25. So maybe we can find a little bit of time to actually spend in 24 going forward. But where we are right now, if you look on slide 3, which Randy has up there, the first two major bullet points, the additional state aid received and titles budget amendments. Those are budget amendments that have already occurred and have been passed by the board. The next two are trending items, the increase in interest on investments and the decrease in realty transfer tax. We're seeing one going up and almost canceling each other out, but we're seeing that type of impact, and we wanted to put that through and flow that through into the budget. And then we also recorded the outcomes of the contract negotiation. So those are changes for 23-24 in that column of the projection master. So going to the next slide, on 24-25, we're projecting increased interest on investments to continue. We think that interest rates will come down a little bit, but we're still feeling very happy with where our positions are in that line item. There was a change. PSERS rates did come out in December for the next extended period, so we've adjusted that. We've increased transportation contracts to more correspond with what we've actually seen the last few years, as that's been something that's been increasing costs over inflation. We've increased the amount of the titles revenues in the charter school tuition. There's been a contingency sort of in that line item. We've just moved where that contingency is flowing for some operational purposes. And so if unexpectedly the charter school goes up or the titles does not come in, as we have seen this year, then we can utilize the contingency elsewhere in the budget to offset that. And then moving on to pages 5 through 8 are the detailed line items, and rather than reading off each one of those ones, we'll just wait for any questions, but I do want to touch on page 9, the impact on the fund balance. So as you can see...
Hold on, Joe. Let's go back to page 7.
Okay.
What's different on page 7, Joe?
Okay, that's where I was going to go. Okay, so the two lines in which we were going to go through there, in the key aspect is the change in the real estate tax. So with what was presented last time was a 2% real estate tax increase for 24-25, and then a continual 2% real estate tax increase out into perpetuity. Now where we look on page 9 with that fund balance line, that shows a 2.65% increase in real estate tax in 24-25, and then an assumption of 2.5% in the out years. And that is really the divergence of those two lines. And from there, I am happy to answer any questions you may have, even if it goes into the details of some of those line items on pages 5 through 8.
And the reason we switched to 2.5% in the out years was due to the impacts of ongoing inflation. So historically, we've had about a 2% estimated projection and moving forward, and we're seeing that it's not bearing out with reality, so that's been adjusted.
I think the 2.5 is more of our 5-year average.
Yeah.
Of what has
Yeah,
has
we didn't
actually
you didn't pull it out of the air. Yeah, you based it on recent data. So, any questions from the board?
Deb? I know that we're still early in the budget process for 24-25, so can you just remind me when we'll start to see sort of like new budgetary requests for educational needs, right, to meet the needs of the students?
Could be as early as February, but definitely in March.
Okay, thank you.
Just depends on the work that has to be done in not only understanding this year, but also balancing the requests. And my first question is, okay, well, if we do this, are we really going to do this and what we've been doing, or are we going to is this something else? So we're in that balancing equation right now.
Any others? Okay. Anything else from you?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay. Things we had a lengthy committee of the whole. I think we will take a 5-minute recess and re-adjourn for routine approvals. Thanks. Okay. I'd like to reconvene the January 8th, 2024 State College Area School District Board of Directors meeting. At this time, we have an additional time for public comment. Is there anyone person who would like to make a public comment? Anyone? I'm not logged in anymore. Anyone online? We're gonna just check. Awesome. Okay. So that completes second round of public comment. We'll move on to routine approvals. Is there a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion on any items in routine approvals? Yeah, Ms. Anderson? Dr. Anderson?
Thanks. I'm sure our DECA kids are getting to their overnight travel somehow, but it didn't list busing as one of the costs. So I'm just curious, does the cost include buses, or do you know? Like, I'm sure it's all taken care of, so I'm not really concerned, but I was curious. Right.
That's the best answer ever.
I will double check. I hope they're not walking.
Well, exactly. I'm sure
But I
they're
will-
not walking to
I will double
Hershey.
check to confirm.
Okay.
I think it was an oversight on the listing of fees.
That was what I was guessing, but yeah, just in case. Thank you. I had another question on the football equipment reconditioning. It's just a request that I make every time. It's helpful if we can include for the public and for the board sort of a list of the general athletic equipment that we generally provide. Like, I know that we've seen that document before, but we don't get it every time. But since we have,
You mean equipment replacement cycle?
well, I don't know if we have an equipment replacement cycle. If
I
we
know we have
had
a
that, that
uniform.
would be great. We have a uniform replacement cycle that we've definitely seen. But we've also seen something that lists, like, we provide football pads and helmets, but we don't necessarily provide lacrosse helmets, for example. And the reasoning for that. And I just think it would be helpful when these come in to kind of remind ourselves and the public what it is that SCASD provides and doesn't provide and why. So, thank you. That's fine. So I just wanted to make that my public request again. Thank you. That's it.
Any other questions? Okay. Any public comment on routine approvals?
No.
Okay.
No.
We'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Demo?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Colby?
Yes.
Dr. Miller?
Yes.
Okay, those items have passed. We're moving on to action items. Agenda item 8A is a motion to approve the purchase and installation of baseball, softball scoreboards at Community Field. This is shown in attachment 8A. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Are questions or discussions on this item? Any public comment?
No.
We'll have a roll call.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Demo?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Colby?
Yes.
Dr. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Next up, we have agenda item 8B, a motion to approve a reimbursement resolution related to Mount Nittany Elementary and future capital projects. This is shown in attachment 8B.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments? Okay, really straightforward. Any public comment on this item?
No.
Okay, we'll have a roll call.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Demo?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Colby?
Yes.
Dr. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes, that item is passed. Agenda item 8C is a motion to approve the floor design for Mount Nittany Elementary. This is shown in attachment 8C.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or discussion on this item? We've seen this a couple times in earlier iterations with some generic classroom space and cafeteria space. Okay. Any public comment?
No.
Okay, we'll have a roll call.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Demo?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Colby?
Yes.
Dr. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
That item is passed. Agenda item 8D is a motion to approve a change order for the North Building remodel project. This is shown in attachment 8D. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay. Any public comment?
No.
Okay, we'll have a roll call.
Dr. Demo? Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Colby?
Yes.
Dr. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
That item is passed. Agenda item 8E is a motion to approve an amendment with Ignite Education Solutions for additional services, as shown in attachment 8E.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion on this item?
I had a question.
Sure.
So it says January 8th, 2023 through June 30th, 2025. But January 8th, 2023 was a year ago.
Typo.
Okay. So,
I will say too that it's an amendment to the previous contract too, so I'd have to take a look at it, but I'll double check on all this tomorrow.
thank you. Yeah.
Jonathan, since you're there, could you just explain a little bit more what this amendment is covering? Because that's just not clear to me.
So the main part of the agreement with Ignite is to provide Title VIII services to the non-public schools.
Right.
And then this additional part is also to help us be able to support school psychology interns. So the school district for years has had school psychology interns as a program that we want to keep giving back to the profession since there are so few of them. So the main part of this is to allow us to start a throughway for payment to those interns for us to hire them. And if we don't do that now, they all get placements early for next school year. So the main part of the amendment is going to be to allow us to start collaborating to be able to work with grant programs to pay school psych interns. And then also, because there are no day-to-day school psych substitutes, this will allow us to create a repository for those school psychologists who could help us in times of like personnel needs, et cetera, when someone's out for an extended amount of time, to help us continue to maintain special education timelines and et cetera.
Okay, because the interns were in the original contract.
Correct, yeah. So it's a bunch of the things together. I've looked at this so many times, I don't even remember what's all in the amendment.
Well,
but
that's
yes.
why I was,
Yeah.
yes. So I, last night, was trying to compare the two, and the interns were in both.
So the interns were in both, and then the new one would definitely be about providing additional support services. I think that one was in there.
Is it supervision too for the interns?
The supervision of the interns is also in there. We have to guarantee that someone will be able to supervise the interns as well. And then definitely though the
Day-to-day sub.
the providing the support for substitutes.
So is that because we're finding that we have school psychologists out, or are we down school psychologists?
So we have full staff, but when a school psychologist either resigns or takes a leave, it's not easy to find a day-to-day
Right.
sub. And once a school psychologist takes on a caseload, it's not like they're there for one day and they're done. A case can take anywhere between 60 to 90 days. So at that point, we just want to make sure that if a school psychologist does take leave, we have some people to be able to call to be able to help support those times of need. It's a tough field right now to be able to fill, which is why the grant programs are great and we want to take advantage of them. And since we're really doing what school psychologists should be doing in our school district, we want to continue to give back to that.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any additional questions for Jonathan?
Yes.
Peter?
Define school psychologist.
The school psychologist is the one who is trained in multi-tiered systems of support, and they also are doing all of the evaluations for special education and gifted students. So they're the case managers that give the cognitive assessments, standardized assessments, and help to make the determinations of students with disabilities and mental giftedness. And those are certified people through the state of Pennsylvania. There are limited programs, but there are some grant programs that the PD is trying to bring school psychs into Pennsylvania because there's just so few of them.
Yeah, I just really wanted to make sure that we were super, just understanding very clearly the class of employee we're talking about and that it's not a generic.
Yeah.
Right.
Good question.
Yeah, there's very particular qualifications.
Yes.
Anything additional? Okay, any public comment on this item?
No.
Okay, We'll have a roll call.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Colby.
Yes.
Dr. Miller.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Vader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Demo.
Yes. Okay, that item is passed. That concludes our agenda for this evening. Looking ahead to future meetings, we have January 16th. Policy Development Committee will be here at noon in Panorama Village Boardroom. Additionally, we have January 22nd, 2024 Board Regular Meeting, 7 p.m. Panorama Village Administration Center in the boardroom. And I'd like to adjourn the meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. Have a good evening, everyone. Thanks.